Tom Coleman wasn't looking for a fight. When he drove up the winding gravel road to his family's old cabin in Cypress Ridge that fall afternoon, he was just a father coming home. His son Leo, a Marine deployed overseas, had stored some of his gear and personal belongings at the cabin, a generational property passed down through the Colemans long before neighborhoods like Cypress Creek Estates ever existed. The place wasn't fancy. Weathered wood, a tin roof that sang in the rain, and a view of the ridge that hadn't changed in 60 years. It had been Tom's retreat for decades, a place for hunting trips and Christmases, a sanctuary untouched by the noise of modern life. He parked his truck, popped the tailgate, and began unloading footlockers and gear bags, some dusty, some still bearing military shipping labels. He was halfway through organizing the boxes in the cabin when a white SUV rolled up the hill and stopped right behind his truck. Out stepped a woman in oversized sunglasses, clutching a clipboard like a weapon. Her walk was purposeful, like someone inspecting livestock. Without introducing herself, she called out, "You can't be here. This property is part of Cypress Creek, and you're trespassing." Tom blinked, unsure he'd heard her right. "Ma'am, this is my family's property. Been in our name since 1954. I've got the deed in my truck if you need to see it." She didn't ask for the deed. She didn't even look at the property. Instead, she pulled out her phone and began filming. "I'm calling the sheriff," she said. "You've got military stuff, you're not from here, and I don't recognize you. You're stealing." It happened fast. 1 minute Tom was stacking a duffel bag in the cabin foyer. The next he was standing in front of a sheriff's deputy, explaining why he had a key to a home she swore was part of her HOA's protected woodland area. Karen Peters, president of the Cypress Creek Estates HOA, was adamant, loud, aggressive, and confident in her version of the truth. Tom, by contrast, remained calm. He produced paperwork, a folded map of county property lines, and a tax receipt with his name on it. The deputy listened. And then, to Tom's relief, turned to Karen and asked, "Do you have anything that says this land is under HOA control?" She didn't. Because it wasn't. After 30 awkward minutes and a few whispered conversations in the gravel driveway, the deputy left, apologizing to Tom. Karen did not. She stood beside her SUV with arms crossed, staring at Tom like he had defiled her temple. "Don't think this is over," she muttered as she left. It wasn't. Over the next several days, envelopes started appearing at the cabin gate. Notices from the HOA. Unauthorized use of private property. Non-compliant structure. Illegal storage of hazardous materials. All of them bearing HOA letterhead, none of them signed by an attorney. Tom ignored the first one. Then the second. But by the third, curiosity took hold. He visited the county assessor's office and requested a full property history. The plat map showed something strange. A dotted line had been drawn, unofficially, around several properties just outside the actual HOA boundary, including his. That line didn't appear on any county documents. It was hand-drawn in the corner of a meeting summary from a Cypress Creek board session. It was dated 6 years ago. Next to it, a note in pen. "Potential future expansion, vote pending." No vote ever happened. Tom drove back to the cabin, stopped at the Miller's house 2 lots down, an elderly couple who'd lived there since the 70s, and asked if they'd ever had trouble with the HOA. Mr. Miller just laughed, a dry and bitter chuckle. "They started sending us fines 4 years ago," he said. "Told us our porch railing was a code violation. We didn't know we were part of the HOA. Never signed anything. How much have they made you pay? Almost $5,000 by now. Or they said they'd put a lien on our house." Tom felt his stomach turn. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was extortion. When he brought it up with his wife Sarah that evening, she wasn't surprised. "Bullies don't come with warning labels anymore," she said. "They come with clipboards and community titles. This isn't about regulations. It's about power." Tom wasn't a crusader by nature. He worked in logistics, believed in systems and fairness, but preferred peace to conflict. Still, something about the Miller story, about that smug look on Karen's face, sparked something deep. A quiet fire. He decided to investigate. He filed a public records request for the HOA's articles of incorporation and their last 5 years of meeting minutes. It took some effort, but when the documents arrived, they painted a disturbing picture. Karen had been quietly annexing properties outside the HOA boundary by sending letters that implied official inclusion, then issuing citations to enforce it. Most people, confused and afraid, paid the fines. A few tried to challenge her. Their cases went nowhere, thanks in part to the notarized forms Karen's husband, Peter, had signed to certify the expanded boundaries. The whole scheme was built on illusion. No court approvals. No proper votes. Just paper, signatures, and a lot of intimidation. Tom reached out to an old friend, Grant, who lived across the creek and was a retired surveyor. Together, they mapped the real boundaries versus Karen's pretend empire. The discrepancy was obvious and damning. They shared the information with Mr. Miller, who wept. Not out of fear, but out of relief. He hadn't been crazy all these years. He'd been conned. They decided it was time to push back, not through lawsuits or angry letters, but by shattering Karen's favorite weapon, isolation. Her power came from fear, silence, and disconnection. She bullied people one at a time, making them feel alone and overpowered. Tom wanted to change that. He invited every property owner within a 2-mile radius to a barbecue. No politics. No speeches. Just burgers, cornhole, lemonade, and conversation. He called it a neighbor meet and greet, and said it was in honor of Leo, who was returning home in a few weeks. Most didn't RSVP. But when the day came, more than 30 people showed up. Families, retirees, couples with folding chairs and Tupperware dishes. Karen came too. She didn't eat. Didn't speak. She stood at the edge of the yard with her clipboard in hand, jotting things down like a school principal patrolling recess. Tom noticed. And when the time felt right, he walked up to her, not confrontational, but direct. "You're welcome to stay," he said. "But this isn't about the HOA. It's about community. Something your paperwork doesn't define," she scoffed. "You don't understand how things work here." "I think I do," he replied. "I think they work because people let them. And I'm done letting this continue." She didn't respond, just turned and left. That night, several neighbors approached Tom and shared stories, nearly all echoing the same theme: fake violations, unexplained fees, threats of liens. One couple had even been told they'd need to replace their roof to conform with neighborhood appearance, even though they weren't under HOA jurisdiction. The pattern was undeniable. Tom began compiling everything: witness statements, deed maps, before and after violation photos, notarized forms that never matched actual land records. With help from Grant and Mr. Miller, he built a portfolio that even a lazy prosecutor couldn't ignore. Then he sent it to the state attorney general's office, to the local news, and to a friend of Sarah's who worked in government accountability. The fuse was lit. Within 2 weeks of sending the files, Tom received a call from the State Department of Community Affairs. A soft-spoken woman named Erin Burley introduced herself as a compliance investigator. She had reviewed the documentation Tom submitted and had a few questions. "Your maps were particularly helpful," she said. "But what I found most troubling were the notarized annexation documents. None of them are on file with the county. And some of the signatures, well, they appear to have been duplicated." Tom felt a surge of adrenaline. "So it's not just unethical? It's criminal," she said. "Forgery, fraud, possible racketeering. And we've opened a formal investigation." For the next month, the sleepy community of Cypress Ridge buzzed with quiet anxiety. Unmarked state vehicles were spotted near the HOA office, which operated out of a converted garage on Karen's property. Residents reported seeing Karen shredding documents at odd hours. One neighbor claimed she had seen Peter, the notary husband, loading boxes into the trunk of a sedan and driving off at dawn. Tom kept his head down and focused on his son's return. Leo came home from deployment on a Tuesday, leaner and quieter than when he left. When he saw the cabin and the new lock Tom had installed, he smiled. "She tried to say we didn't own it," Leo asked after hearing the whole story. Tom nodded. Leo shook his head and muttered, "People like that should never be allowed power." By that weekend, the state had obtained a warrant. Karen's home office was raided. They seized computers, files, and a surprisingly large number of blank fine notices already printed with signatures. Peter was arrested on site for fraudulent notarization. Karen resisted, shouting that her authority came from the board and that the state had no jurisdiction over her private community. That was quickly debunked when officials showed her the county maps proving otherwise. The story broke locally first. "HOA president under investigation for fraud and forgery," the headline read. But within days, it was picked up by regional outlets, then national ones. The idea of a power-hungry HOA president forging documents to extend control struck a nerve. Talk radio lit up with calls from listeners sharing similar stories. Cable news invited analysts to debate the unchecked power of homeowners associations. It wasn't just about Karen anymore. She had become a symbol. As the legal proceedings unfolded, a civil review board was assigned to dissolve the HOA. Many residents, it turned out, had never properly consented to join it. A thorough audit revealed that over $92,000 had been collected in bogus fines over the years, most of it funneling through Karen's personal checking account, and Peter's shell company's Point One company, Ridgeview Maintenance Solutions, had received more than $40,000 in mandatory HOA contractor work referrals. The only problem? The company didn't actually do any work. It filed invoices, collected payments, and disappeared. And Peter owned it. Tom was called to testify as a witness. He stood in a courtroom, under oath, and described what had begun as a family visit and turned into a fight for community justice. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't posture. But his words cut through the noise. "I didn't want a war," he said plainly. "But I wasn't going to let my son come home to a country where people like Karen can take something from you with a fake map and a clipboard. That's not America. That's a con." The judge agreed. In a landmark decision, the HOA was not only dissolved, but all collected fines were ordered to be refunded. Karen and Peter faced multiple charges: fraud, forgery, racketeering, elder abuse. Their assets were frozen. A restitution fund was set up for victims like the Millers. The day the news came in, Tom drove to the Millers' house. Mr. Miller answered the door, with his oxygen tank trailing behind him, his hand trembling slightly, as he held out a yellow envelope from the restitution office. $5 $400, he whispered. "Every penny." They hugged, and Tom noticed tears in the old man's eyes. "You saved this neighborhood," Mr. Miller said. "We were scared. You gave us our voice back." Tom didn't feel like a savior. He felt tired, relieved. But more than that, he felt something return, something he hadn't realized he'd lost. Faith. And decency. In what happens when people decide to stand up instead of stepping aside. He returned to the cabin with Leo, and they spent that weekend fixing the back deck, cleaning out the attic, and starting the fire pit for a family dinner. It felt peaceful again. Real. Sarah joined them with her usual dry wit, teasing them about all the tools spread across the lawn. "We've got our place back," she said. "Now let's not give it away again." But the story didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, Tom began receiving letters, emails, messages from other neighborhoods, people who had seen the story and wanted to know how he did it, how he gathered proof, how he rallied the community, how he stayed calm in the face of intimidation. Some messages were heartbreaking. Veterans who'd been forced to sell their homes after HOA harassment. Elderly residents fined into foreclosure. One woman wrote, "I thought I was crazy until I read your story. Thank you for making me feel sane again." Tom replied to as many as he could. He started a small blog. "Stand your ground. homeowner stories, and posted resources on how to check your property lines, file public records requests, and organize peaceful community gatherings. He wasn't looking for fame. He just wanted to make it easier for the next person who found themselves staring down a clipboard tyrant in their own driveway. He hosted one more barbecue before the winter, this time with twice the turnout. No clipboards. No fines. Just neighbors, laughing, swapping stories, and passing around plates of brisket. Leo stood by the fire pit, quiet as ever, watching his dad work the crowd. "You know," Leo said when they were cleaning up, "for a guy who hates politics, you sure did a hell of a job leading this." Tom chuckled. "It wasn't politics. It was personal." Leo nodded. "Same thing sometimes." They stood in silence, father and son, as the last embers flickered. And for the first time in months, Tom felt the fight was truly over. Winter in Cypress Ridge was quieter than most years. Without Karen's constant notices, threats, and patrols, the neighborhood seemed to exhale. Holiday lights stayed up a little longer. Kids played in driveways without anyone measuring their basketball hoops. A woman named Rosa Ortiz put up a small garden gnome village in her front yard, something Karen had once fined her $150 for. No one said a word this time, except to compliment her creativity. Tom walked the streets often, usually with his thermos and old military jacket. People stopped him to chat. Some thanked him again. Others asked if he was going to run for anything. He laughed every time. "I just wanted to be left alone," he always said. "Turns out you have to raise hell sometimes to get peace." But the truth was, something had shifted inside Tom. He'd spent his life believing that if you worked hard, paid your dues, and stayed in your lane, you could live free. But Karen's abuse of power had shown him that silence is often mistaken for consent, and bullies count on that silence. So when the county board approached him about helping draft a new set of homeowner guidelines for unincorporated areas, Tom didn't hesitate. He didn't want to be part of another HOA, but he wanted to make sure no one else could do what Karen had done. The committee met monthly in a small courthouse annex, and Tom, now something of a local legend, helped design model policies that protected both property rights and community interests. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. Meanwhile, Leo took a different path. His deployment had changed him. Something in his eyes, his posture, even the way he spoke. He didn't talk much about it, but Tom noticed the shadows. They were familiar. So he wasn't surprised when Leo decided to start school part-time while working at the local VA office. "I want to help guys like me," he said simply. "People who come home, but don't feel home." They fixed up the cabin together that spring, replacing rotted beams, installing solar panels, clearing brush from the back fence line. It became a place of quiet refuge, not just for their family, but for others too. Veterans from Leo's group sometimes came by for bonfires and storytelling. One of them carved a wooden sign for the front porch that read, "This land was fought for. It will not be taken." The phrase stuck. Not just because it was powerful, but because it captured what so many homeowners across the country had begun to feel. Tom's story had gone viral not because it was unique, but because it was familiar. In every state, people had experienced versions of what he had: overreaching HOAs, power-mad presidents, the slow erosion of dignity disguised as neighborhood standards. Tom gave interviews. He hated cameras, but did them anyway. CNN, NPR, even a guest column for the Washington Post. Always the same message. Know your rights. Read the bylaws. Speak up early, not just when it gets bad. And never, ever give up your property without a fight. One night, a documentary crew came out to Cypress Ridge. They spent a week filming interviews with residents, gathering footage of the neighborhood, and even reenacting some of the more dramatic confrontations. The Millers appeared in the film, sitting side by side in their modest living room, holding hands. "She made us feel like criminals," Mr. Miller said, voice thick with emotion. "Tom reminded us we're neighbors. Citizens. Not pawns in someone's power trip." The documentary aired on a streaming platform and reached millions. Viewer comments poured in, stories, gratitude, anger, solidarity. The outcry led to a wave of legislative proposals across several states aimed at increasing transparency and accountability in HOAs. Karen Peters became the cautionary tale cited in hearings, policy memos, and community watchdog forums. As for Karen and Peter, their trial concluded 8 months after the raid. Both were convicted, Karen for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement, Peter for conspiracy and notary fraud. They received probation and hefty fines, plus a court order permanently barring them from holding any leadership position in a housing association. It wasn't jail, but it was justice. Back in Cypress Ridge, peace had returned, but not the kind that comes from silence. It was a peace earned, preserved by vigilance and community. Neighbors talked more now. They shared tools, looked out for each other's homes. The old idea of community had been revived, not by policy, but by shared experience and mutual respect. One Saturday in June, Tom and Sarah hosted another barbecue. This time, they didn't need a reason. It was just a gathering for the sake of it. No speeches. No announcements. Just food, laughter, music, and kids running barefoot across the lawn. Leo brought a young woman named Naomi. She was quiet, kind, and wore a medic's badge on her keychain. They stood together under the porch light long after the others had gone, and Sarah nudged Tom with a smile. "I think she's the real reason he's been smiling again." Tom sipped his beer and nodded. "Good. He deserves peace too." As twilight faded into night, fireflies blinked across the yard. The air was thick with the scent of mesquite and fresh-cut grass. Tom looked around and felt, for the first time in a long time, that his world had settled. That all the fighting, the humiliation, the effort, it had meant something, and yet, he never forgot the lesson. Peace was fragile. Dignity could be stolen in quiet ways. And justice, if not pursued, could disappear before anyone realized it was missing. He kept the files. He kept the maps. He kept the letters from other homeowners in a binder labeled, "Speak loudly." And every now and then, he'd open it, not out of paranoia, but to remind himself, and sometimes others, what can happen when a clipboard becomes a weapon and silence becomes complicity. The cabin stood, stronger than ever, as did the community around it. And Tom Coleman, once just a father unloading his son's footlocker, had become something else entirely. Not a hero, not a martyr, just a man who drew a line and held it, not with anger, not with violence, but with patience, facts, and the unwavering belief that no one, no matter how small their title or how big their ambition, has the right to steal your home, your pride, or your peace. And in that stand, he reminded an entire nation that freedom doesn't just live on battlefields. Sometimes, it lives in driveways, on porch steps, in community barbecues, and in the quiet, relentless courage of someone who decides, enough